8 months figuring it out.
My name is John Tucker, and I'm here from the South Carolina Historical Society, and it's a great pleasure to be here today to talk about a very important book and a very important history. But I get the honor today of introducing our hostess, Dr. Dorothy Kendall, who's also one of our great board members for the Historical Society. Dorothy?
Take your hat off,
Thank you, John. Your other host is my husband Ed, right here in the hat. We couldn't have done it without everyone's help, including the Historical Society. My cousin Jim came down from Greensboro. And a couple of people I want to mention who aren't here, and they are Malcolm Miller, our contractor, who's an old school artisan craftsman. It took 18 months to build our porch and replace our foundations. So, otherwise, we wouldn't be safe to have company. And then Ken Huggins, our architect, he's a native of Columbia, but he practices in Charleston. And Ken drives up to check on things with his house. It's like his baby. So anyway, but the real reason we're here is to celebrate Brenda's book and Brenda and this history. I want to thank Brenda for all of her efforts. Where are you, Brenda? There you are. Brenda and I met you can read it in the introduction to the book, but we met about 16 years ago. Introduced by our cousin, or sister, Tanya, who's a medical school classmate of my husband Ed's. And I'd known Tanya for a while and never knew we were cousins. And then we found this out, and then Brenda found it out, and the rest is kind of our personal history. We've been to the beach together and been back and forth to each other's homes and know each other's children and grandchildren. And interestingly, there are two people who are not here today that I think it's just such a wonderful, Brenda says it's not a coincidence, but it's destiny that her granddaughter Micah and our daughter Catherine are both freshmen at Davidson College together in the same class, and now know each other. But anyway, Brenda went through so much. When I met Brenda, she had finished her the first edition of this book. And I think it's changed somewhat, but the story is basically the same. And I'm amazed to see what I know. It took painstaking hours and hours and hours, and was exhausting to do. So she was very courageous. For those of you who know her, she's courageous. Has a little bit of a stubborn side, but a very loving person. So she did it with love. Yeah, we had that in common. The South Carolina Historical Society, I want to thank for helping us with the kind of bringing this all together. And it just came out of a lot of different conversations we were having. And there's some real interesting work that they're doing, looking at our shared past and the colonial and antebellum records, and trying to conserve these things for future generations. Hopefully this won't be just this one book, but kind of a beginning of people. All those old manuscripts and papers that you have, the Historical Society can teach you how to store them or digitize them, or if you want, you can donate them and they'll take care of them for you. Because it just takes, one bad marriage or one maybe ill thought out death. Not that we think it out, but you can have your boxes of history that then just end up on the curb. So I guess I became aware, started feeling like it was real important to try to take care of these things that we have. Anyway, without further ado, let me see if there's anything else I want to do. Notes. I think that's it. Brenda, take it away. Okay.
One of the best quotes in the book was that both families knew the existence of the others and would show up at each other's funerals, but never the weddings.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't get an invite to that wedding or anything, but you show up at funerals.
Yeah. Anybody can come to those.
Yeah.
For sharing your home. I I was gonna use this as a table, Aaron. Okay, I'll come down right here. How is that? I still have a table. What a historical day. This is a historical day. I wish my father could be here. Zach C. Clarkson. I wish he could be here today. He would love it. He would love it. Now, what I wanted to do, and I wanted to move very quickly through this, I want everybody to introduce yourselves and how you might relate to this event. If it slows you down, just pop up, give your name, anything. Taylor, I'm from the Edward McCready side. May Taylor, anything. I want everybody to meet each other, please. Let's start right here.
Stuart Clarkson.
Stuart Clarkson.
Garden. Right?
Yes.
And my papa used to call him Uncle Ed.
Uncle Ed, yeah. This is Edward McCready's. Yes. Yeah.
I've already said.
Margaret Clarkson-Turpeau, and I'm his oldest daughter.
Okay.
And this is my husband, Babcock, and we're related back in the several years.
Of living life with my grandchildren and my mother and father through their illnesses. So altogether 12. I started back in, am I too loud? Because I started back in March of last year. I said, I'm going to pull this book together and I'm going to publish it. So I did just that and finished it in November of 2011. I wrote this book for 3 main reasons. The number one reason was for my father, Zach C. Clarkson. He loved to tell stories about Eastover and Hopkins people. And if any of you knew, he talked all the time. And his stories, I would say, Dad, oh Dad, that's a lovely story. And he turned so red, and he would get huffy, and he said, Gal, that's no story, that's the truth. I said, okay, Dad, that's the truth. But Polly Hopkins Adams was one of the loves of his life, and that was his grandmother. And he slept with his grandmother until he was about 12 years of age. He tells that story. So he had all the stories inside of his head, and he had a wonderful memory. Polly Hopkins Adams was born in 1859. During Sherman's march, the Civil War. She remembered everything that happened. She remembered when the Meeting House plantation was burned and how they had to escape. She remembered how they had to bury the artifacts in the backyard. And she remembered the times, the generations before her, stories were told to her. So she shared with my father all these stories. So I was able to put them down and put them together. My father was sick there for a while, and I wanted to make sure that I gave him something special. I gave him the first draft of Almost Forgotten a year before he left this earth, and he was so proud of it. And he loved his family, black and white, and he would try his best to get to know every one of you. And some of you probably can vouch for that. Yes. And the second reason I wrote this story as a legacy to my grandchildren. I wanted my grandchildren to know who they were and to be proud of who they were. That was the second reason. Then the third reason that I wrote this book, and I'm going to read it to you because I want to make sure I say it right. The third reason I wrote this book, Almost Forgotten, The Real America, as a historical and genealogical document to record my family's, the Clarksons and the Scotts, journey as African Americans in this America. All right, and a little side note. When I had finished doing all the genealogy and did the ancestry chart and went all down the line, we were shocked. My mother and daddy were cousins. we were really shocked. Their common ancestor was Joel Adams of Virginia, 1750, 1832. But that was something else. Now, the setting for Almost Forgotten is about 12 miles south of Columbia on Highway 48, on a little farm called the Home Place. This farm was purchased for Polly Hopkins Adams by Edward McCready Clarkson for their children and for her. And this farm was the hub of activity. When I came into the world, it was a 40-acre farm. But when I came into the world, and I lived there the first 11 years of my life, it was the center of the family's entrepreneurial system. We had logging, cotton, gin housing, sawmilling, anything that would work. They were a Clarkson. They operated a general store. And Zach Rice, my grandfather, who we call Fess, and his wife Wilhelmina were teachers. He was the principal and she was his teacher. And I want to make sure I tell you everything about Polly's farm. She and Edward had 5 children. I'm going to see if I can name them. There was Eugene Clarkson, and his grandson represents, and his grandchildren represents him. There was David Clarkson. He had no descendants. And there was Zach R. Clarkson, my grandfather. And there was Nellie Clarkson and a Maxie Clarkson. So they had 5 children. And some of the stories, I have so many stories that I just have a file that I'm dropping them in. And maybe someone else will add to all of this later on. But the other thing, the most interesting character that I met along the way, no one knew anything about, with the exception of my grandfather, his 2 granddaughters, and my grandmother never spoke of anything. Her name was Maddie Fowles Willis Berry. She was like she dropped out of the sky. She had no mother, she had no father, she had nothing. She was just there. And through my research, I was able to ascertain that she had been raped at age 14. She worked as a washwoman in the governor's mansion, J.P. Richardson. And the love of her life was a Buffalo Soldier. You'll have to read more about her life from the books, okay? It was a real interesting life. And I've documented it well, I think. Now, I'm gonna stop talking, but I wanna read a couple of things from my book. And let's see, can I have some help here? Yeah, I got it down here. Could someone hold my mic for me? Aaron, you wanna hold it up?
See how much she expects?
Here we go. Good. Ed's got it. Okay. 120. Let's see. Okay. This is about Papa Scott and our relationship. Papa Scott was the apple of my eye. We loved each other unconditionally. I was the first grandchild in this huge family. I was so loved that it was like being in heaven. When Papa Scott came to get me, I had my suitcase packed. This suitcase was really a brown paper bag, but it served its purpose. He drove a green 1947 Chevrolet. As soon as he arrived, I was ready to go. He visited with Rachel Lee for a few minutes, and off we went. Our first stop was Uncle Jeff's store in Eastover. Uncle Jeff's store was the same old wooden store that Grandpa Ben has used as his butcher shop. It had a slight lean to it. There were always some people in or near it milling around. The sidewalks and the land around the store was sand, which was always present in the front door of the store. Every time someone came in, you could hear the scrape of sand on the floors. There was a small gas pump outside and two wooden benches on each side. Uncle Jeff was a light-skinned, brown-skinned man who kept a pleasant smile on his face. He and Papa Scott had a quiet love for each other. It never had to be said. You could see it whenever they met and greeted each other. I was allowed to have an ice cream cone every time and a pound bag of candy every time we went to Uncle Jeff's store. While I was making my choices of candies, Papa Scott visited with the men milling around the store. I packed a bag of candy, to which Uncle Jeff added a few more pieces at no extra charge. There was bubble gum, Kits, hot balls, and the special Mary Janes running over the top of the bag. By this time, Papa Scott was ready to go. He never stayed any place very long. That's from the Scott's family. And I want to read from my father's family. And I need a drink of water. They said you're doing a great job. Okay. Zach was drafted into the U.S. Army in April of 1942. He was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. When Zach received his notice, he went in on the day assigned on the written orders. When he got there, the clerical lady recorded the demographic data from each draftee, looked at him and told him that he was there on the wrong day. Zach insisted that this was the right day. He showed her his orders. She said that they were drafting only colored soldiers today, and he must come back tomorrow. Zach said, "I can't leave. I will be AWOL." She screeched at him, "Come back tomorrow." When he refused, she jumped up, snatched the paper out of the typewriter, and ran into the back room. Returning, she brought with her an Army officer who took Zach in the back. A psychiatrist was brought in to make sure Zach was not playing games. The psychiatrist took about 5 hours to trying to convince Zach that he was white and not colored. And if he was colored, as he said he was, why not just go in the White Army? "Zach, you will get better breaks and it won't be as hard," said the doctor. Zach told the doctor that he had been brought up as a colored man all of his life, and he was not going to change now. He had family that was as black as coal, and family. At this point, the doctor took Zach back to the clerk and told her, "Sign him up." So those were a couple readings. One more reading, and then I'm going to have Dorothy come up. This is from a reading from the testimony of the book here on the back. Okay. Talk about mixed emotions. Reading Brenda Clarkson-Turpeau's family history is gratifying and exciting. I recognize the emotional heartstrings that are pulled in this family's being. There are warm and tender moments that seek to soften the harsh and often cruelty in some behavior. There are complex entanglements that blows your mind. Sometimes I am so upset by the mean things and their political as well as emotional impact that I'm almost numb to the fascinating layers of human drama. Almost Forgotten is a significant and compelling account of this family's trials and tribulations, achievements and successes, reminding us of how God moves in mysterious ways to bring sanity out of madness, love out of hatred, beauty out of horror, art out of chaos, and deposits an amazing America on the face of the earth. Thanks, Brenda, for a painstaking task that surely brought pain and sorrow, yet joy and triumph. Well done, Dr. Joseph E. Lowry, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom Award. And he was my pastor for 30 years. Thank you. Ed. Where's Dorothy? I want her to read something from the foreword.
I had no warning about this. Recently, in replacing the foundation of the sandhills, we salvaged over 1,000 handmade bricks. No doubt made nearby, the bricks whisper their own story. A small cat's paw print in one, a human thumbprint in another. In the words of Tolkien, history gets lost and old things are forgotten, but traces remain. Ultimately, I like to think that we have more in common as Southerners, indeed as humans, than not. Still, looking at the past can make us uncomfortable and awkward. Out of discomfort, it's all too easy to let the trail of real connections go cold and accept some sanitized or demonized version of the past. On the other hand, we can try to cherish, grieve, and understand the fragments of what remains as we make new stories with each other. In closing, my cousin Brenda Clarkson-Turpeau has compiled a remarkable combination of personal story, Southern history, and family genealogy that makes a fascinating read, not only for her own extended family members, but also for those who want to know more about a uniquely American family.
Thank you. Now, Dorothy. We made history today. We told our story, and that's the truth. That's those stories. That's those stories. That's the truth. Now I'm going to go and eat some apples.
Captured all of her? Got it captured.